Hi, my name is Neha, and today I'm going to do book review for the Paris Library. This is one of my book club books that I was assigned, and I thought I should give 2 cents of what I felt after reading this book. I wanted to split this review in three parts. Part one, I want to talk the plot in general, trying to not give any more spoilers. Part two, I want to talk about different characters in this book and what I felt about them. In part three, things I liked about the book and things I did not like about the book. So let's get started. Part one, the plot of the book. It's set in when the Nazis occupied France, and the background for this is set in a library. What happens to a library when it is captured by an enemy? In this case, it was Nazis who try to occupy France. And it's a story of a small family with the two parents and brother and sister, and the sister is the one who starts her job in the library, and she talks about how she came across loving library and what happens gradually to the library once the Nazis occupy the France as its own territory. So it's a nice book where you see how very normal day people like us, what goes through their emotions when something like this happens. And then there is a second storyline that the author introduces is set in 1980s, which is like 40 years later, with the character from the 1940, 40 years later. How does life look for her in 40 years later? So the plot line is broken into two parts. One set in 1940, and then the other plot line is set in 1980, and it goes back and forth with the book. There are certain chapters that will be around in 1930s and 1940s, and then there are certain chapters that are in 1980s and 1990s. And in the second half, you have this character who has gone through an ordeal in 1940s when Nazis occupied France. How does her life look in America in 1980s? She moves to America after that, and what happens to her? What does her life look in 1980s? And there you are introduced to her neighbors in Montana. She moves to Montana in America, and how do her neighbors view her? How do a small society around her view her as a French woman in America? Is very interesting. And then she gets involved with um, her neighbor's family. She's just trying to help her neighbor's family, and her, I would say, journey through grow. I think her journey with her neighbor's family is what is also very interesting. So I think I like the fact that there is this one character that we are following uh, from 1940 to 1980s, and what she has undergone in this 40 years, and what happens to a person who's been through something after 40 years. So that was very interesting. That's the plot of the book, The Paris Library. As I said, library is the background which is set where our main character works, and her passion for books continues overall in this book. It's an interesting read. Definitely, you need to read it. to figure out, hey, what happens with her 40 years later? How does she, what kind of a journey she goes in when she is trying to help her neighbor's family in America. So that was my part one, just an overall gist of the book, of where this book is. Now, part two, there are various characters that are in this book, but the most important character that we follow is Odile. Odile is the one who gets a job in a library in 1940s before Germany occupies France, and she's the one. Then she moves to Montana in US, and her journey after 40 years, why she moved to US, and how do her community views her as a French woman. And we are intrigued, like, why did she move to US? Because when you read the first half of the book, you realize she's so passionate about being a librarian, and how her love for books emanated from her aunt, who introduced her to this world of books and Dewey System. Dewey System is how they mark the books in the library. For us, it would be this FSKE. So she was very intrigued with that, and that's how her love for books started. Her aunt introduced to this world. And it's true, I think for every one of us who love to read books, we all have our starting point. For me, it was one of my friend who introduced me to this book of this world of books, which was amazing. So it was very interesting to know it was her aunt who brought her into this world. Then you have her brother, who's a twin brother, Remy. He's not the main character, but he's the twin brother who goes to the army to fight for France, and she's very close to him. So he is not the main character, but he is integral to her journey and her story. And then you have all her librarian friends. Those characters are really written well by the author, especially Miss Reader. Miss Reader is an American who is interested in historicals, and she's the one who is the directress at the American Library in Paris. And she's the one who hires Odile because they had very similar love for books when she was hired. The story starts with her interview for this position in the library, and you immediately realize how both of them are deeply in love with this world of books. So we have Miss Reader, we have Odile, we have Miss Reader, who is the directress or the head of the librarian, and then you have ancillary characters, other librarians. Bitsy. Bitsy is the storyteller for kids section, and she also ends up being a love interest for Odile's brother Remy, who ends up going to war to fight for France. Bitsy and Odile's relationship was written very well for me because it seemed very normal emotions that you feel is what she has displayed. Like when Odile's brother goes to the army and Bitsy was standing by the brother Remy, Odile was very upset that Betsy encouraged Remy to leave law school and go fight in the army. For Odile, she was losing her brother, and she was mad at Bitsy. Whereas from Bitsy's perspective, it was like she was encouraging Remy to do what he wanted to do. So it was the conflict was written very well, and Miss Reader, the directress of the librarian, helps resolve this conflict also in a very well manner. So I thought the author wrote human emotions very beautifully. Then we have Boris. I love him. He's a wonderful character. Boris is a Russian Russian born person who is living in France, and he's working in the library, and he's one of the smartest and the strongest person I know. He's a wonderful to read, and he's very helpful with everybody. And then you have the Shelver and the other characters that do a small task in the library, but then you have two sparring friends who are always fighting about politics or anything around them, whether it's wine, cigarettes, or anything. But these are the patrons, the two patrons, the old men who are always there in the library for the books, and they have this nice banter going on. And sometimes Odile becomes the referee resolving their conflict. It's very humorous that the way author has written. The other patron that we have is Margaret. She comes into the library for the storytelling for her child, and then she ends up volunteering at the library, and Odile helps her, and they end up becoming friends. And that's so Margaret is English born woman whose husband is stationed in France as an ambassador, and this is again all prior to Germany occupying France. It starts with the life before Germany occupying France, so you have all these characters that are introduced in here. Now I forgot to mention, so there are characters that are set in France in 1940s, and then you have other set of characters that are set in 1980s in America. So I'm going to move from my characters from France, which was basically Odile, our main protagonist whom we follow from 1940s to 1980s, Miss Reader, who was the directress or the manager of the librarian. Then we have Boris, a Russian-born immigrant who works at the library at the front desk at times. Then we have Margaret, an English-born woman who came as who came with her husband to France, but then she ends up volunteering at the library and starts working at the library. We have Betsy, who is the love interest of Odile's brother Remy, and also we have Remy, who is the brother of Odile. We also have Odile's parents, who are also introduced, and her father is a police commissioner and her mother is a housewife. So it's very beautifully written on that end too. And then we have Paul. Paul is the love interest of Odile in France. So these are all the characters in 1940s, set in 1940s in France, that we are introduced to. In 1980s, we are introduced to very different set of characters. We have Lily. Lily is Odile's neighbor in US. She lives right across Odile's house. So Odile is they didn't talk much. There was just hi and hello, but as the book progresses, we figure out how Lily and Odile get together. So Lily is one of the important protagonists in 1980s, who is neighbor of Odile's in US, in Montana. Then we have Lily's father and Lily's mother. Since this is not a spoiler free video, let me tell you that Lily loses her mother in the early chapters of the book, and she and Lily were very close to each other. Then Lily had another friend, Mary Louise, which is her best friend in the book, and she's also one of the characters. She's not an important character, but she's like a Remy for Odile. They are brother and sisters, and they had a very close relationship. Same as with Lily and Mary Louise. They're very good friends, very close friends, and she's not an important character, but she's very connected to Lily. And then you have Lily's father, and then you have Eleanor. Eleanor is Lily's stepmother, and she has her own journey in this whole process for Eleanor. So in US you have Lily, you have Mary Louise, you have Lily's parents, Lily's mom and dad, and then Lily's stepmom. They are all the characters that they have set in US. So that's what those are the characters that we have in France and US. The only character that does move from France to US is Odile, our main protagonist. Now, let's go to part 3, the things I liked and things I did not like. Let's go with the things I liked. The thing that I did like about the book is you have this one main character that is set in 1940s, and how her life looks later on is very nice to know. Like, yes, you when you're young you think differently, and when you're in your 40s you're thinking very differently. Second thing I did like about the book was the human emotions. I think the author captured the human emotions wonderfully. There are so many instances where, you know, you feel like, yeah, that's what's gonna be my normal reaction to things. When she has a fight with her Margaret, who was her one of the best friends, or was the best friend, as the book progresses, and I think it was very. You think like you would have those kind of conversations with your friend if you're upset. I also liked what Lily was feeling in US when her mother died, when her stepmom comes into the picture, and when the stepmom has her own kids with her father. The emotions that the author has written is very, it connects you. You can feel it. It's real. So I think that was beautifully done. And then how Lily and Odile's love star. Odile had already love for books, but how Odile introduced Lily to this world of books and French. So it was very beautifully written. I think the author has done very well captured the emotions of humans in this, or all the characters in this book. The things I did not like, I personally do not prefer going back and forth, because you have 4 chapters set in 1940s and then you move to 1980s. Like the very beginning you have this interview process for Odile in 1940s, and then the very second chapter is Lily, so set in 1980s. So it's just little not my cup of tea. I do not like going back and forth. So there is 1940s, 1980s, 1940s, 1980s, and then it becomes based on the character. The chapters are based on the character. Initially it was just Odile and Lily, and then the other characters come into the picture. So I do not like that. That's just my personal preference. I do not like when the book moves back and forth. Since the number of characters were not many, it's fine. But now you have 2 plot lines going, and you need to remember, oh, the 1940 plot line was at this end, and now 1980s plot line is at this end. So, not my personal preference. I don't like this book going back and forth. The second thing I did not like was the author made Odile's first love in France a villain. I did not like that. When he is introduced, he's introduced as such a wonderful character, very supportive of Odile. She wanted to be a working independent woman. He supports that. He declines a promotion from Odile's father. Both of them were cops, Paul and Odile's father, and Paul's father is the one who had introduced them, and he declined the promotion because he thought it would be wrong. It seemed like Paul was such a supportive guy, and then the author made him a villain at the end because he had anger issues is not something I could fathom. It just seemed very unrealistic that this guy who is that wonderful has this anger side to him about not only does he have an anger side, but he goes to the extreme when Germany is occupies France, and it just was very strange. Written. I didn't like the end part of the book at all. It was not one of my favorite part. I thought the book, 3/4 of the book was awesome, but the last ending was not something that I liked about the book at all. And then her moving or running away to US, she runs away from France. So the book is set where we follow Odile's family before Germany occupies France, while it's occupied, and then once America enters the war, and then the France is free from Germany. At the end, you have where it's so rushed, where she's trying to run away from Paul because she realizes he's a monster, and instead of talking to him or anything else, she decides that she's going to run away with an American soldier, get married to him, whom she had known for less than a week. It just didn't make sense. The ending seemed very abrupt, very weird. I was very curious what brought her to America in a small state like Montana, in a small city where she decided to live, and it just felt strange, rushed. It seems like it just seemed very untrue for me that you have following Odile and Paul throughout the book, 3/4 of the book, and then within one chapter, within 5 lines, you're like, oh, I met this guy, I like him, I'm gonna run away from him, and I'm gonna run away with him to America just because I don't want to deal with the consequences of my failed marriage. It just to Paul, and it just seemed very strange and weird. Didn't like it, so I didn't like that at all. The ending was too rushed. It was nice to hear Lily's speech, but it didn't make much difference to me. In the end, there is this twist where Lily comes to Odile to talk about her time in France as a book report, and that's when we realize that Odile was very close to killing herself, and Lily saves her by asking her to come home, and then they have this interaction where then Lily and Odile become friends, I would say, where Odile introduces her to the world of France and French language and the world of books, and Lily is there so that Odile is never lonely. Another thing that was very weird was they never talk about Odile's kid. Apparently she does have a kid in US, but he also died in the war. But he's just mentioned in 2 or 3 lines, so don't know what's going on there. So that was very strange ending, I would say. I was following the book 3/4 of the way, and I was hoping that something. I really wanted to know the girl who was so passionate about her library in France, even after Germany occupied the France, but they let the library be, and she was still working there. Why did she go to US? It didn't matter what kind of circumstances ever there in France, she still worked in the library. Why did she move to US? And the plot line seemed weak to me, that she was trying to flee from Paul, her first husband in France, which ended up being a monster. Again, like I said, I did not like that the author made Paul the bad guy. There are other plot lines that I have not touched upon, which is one of them is there is a Jew professor who was also a patron in the library in France, and how or what happens to her once Germany occupies the France. So I missed that plot line. I also missed the plot line of, I didn't miss it, but I didn't cover it. Was the plot line with Lily and Odile and Eleanor. Lily and Eleanor's relationship was strange. I would say estranged in the beginning, and then once Eleanor has her own kids, the relationship does get a little better. So I do like it. Would I recommend somebody? I don't think so. It's not one of my favorite books I have read in 2024, but it was a different type of a book that I have read in some time. I've been reading a lot of fantasy books, so it was like a palate cleanser kind of a book. Hey, let's try something different, which is not, it's a fiction, but it's not fantasy. So it overall, it's an okay book. That's what I put it on Goodreads. I gave them 2 stars. It's an okay book. Like I said, it was like more of a palate cleanser for me, and definitely I love the background set in the library and the different kind of characters that you have in library in France. So that was beautiful, and like I said, not a second read book or something that I would recommend. Thank you for listening.